Hey everybody, welcome to the About That podcast. My name is Chantel Millen. I'm your host, and this is just a place where we will talk about Christ, marriage, crafts, and just other things that come up in life. What I want to share with you today is something that I'm still processing. I am still pursuing the Lord to continue to reveal to me. So let me be upfront about that. But it is something that has really been kind of ringing in my heart the last 24 hours. And so I wanted to share it with you in hopes that you will share back, right? Comment, message through our social media sites, things like that. And kind of let me know if this resonates with you, what the Lord is sharing with you about it, etc. Really quickly, let me just say this. I was looking at my phone the other day and my Poshmark app put up a notification on my phone, and they oftentimes will send like quotes, and which is great. And one of the quotes that they sent to me yesterday was, it said, "Be reminded that most people's social medias is just a highlight reel of their life." Basically meaning that, when you're looking at someone's social media, it's usually the best parts of what's happening in their life a lot of times. And so not to be distracted by that or discouraged by that or comparing or whatever. And so as I thought about that, I started thinking about the podcast, because oftentimes when we look at podcasts or listen to them, they may be like really polished and practiced and edited really, really well, all of those things. And so what I realized was that for this particular podcast, I did not necessarily want that to that extent. I want this to feel real and honest and authentic, with the mistakes and the and nights like tonight where I'm sharing information that I'm still trying to process and internalize and pursue the Lord about, because that's real life, right? And so why not? So anyway, what I want to share with you is part of a conversation me and my husband were having yesterday. We were talking about leadership, and as we were talking, 3 words came to mind: care, cover, and communicate. Now, I love alliteration. Like, give me some good alliteration any day of the week, and I am excited. And so as I was thinking about these 3 words in regards to leadership, they really sort of resonated and stuck with me. Now, don't turn off the podcast just yet, just because you've heard the word leadership, and perhaps you are saying to yourself, I'm not a leader, so it doesn't apply to me. In all reality, you most likely are a leader in some way. Why? If you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, friends, neighbors, if you're in ministry, if you own a business, if you work anywhere, if you have a staff, if you have employees, if you are in government, if you are a city official, whatever the case might be, in some way, there's likely someone that you are leading, right? In the sense that they are looking up to you or looking to you for information, for advice, for a role model, whatever the case might be. And so just hear me out, all right? Just hear me out. Those 3 words: care, cover, and communicate, and specifically in that order. And I'll tell you why quickly. I've noticed in my own leadership, especially now that we are in a larger leadership role, the largest one I've had in my life, that if I tend to lead with what I want, what I need, information, etc., and I don't lead with care, then sometimes that information is not as well received, because people can start to feel just like another person on your staff, or just another person that you're trying to give information to, or just like the care is not there, like you don't really care for them as a person. And so I've discovered that when you lead with care, right, then people tend to receive your communication in the way that we desire for it to be received, right? And they tend to follow through with it better, and kind of come alongside the vision closer, and things of that nature when they feel cared for. And also when they feel covered, when they feel like you as their leader have their back, right? And so care, cover, and communicate, specifically in that order, are the three things that really resonated again while I was having my conversation with my husband yesterday. And so as I was thinking about those three words, as I normally do, I asked the Lord to show me, like biblically, perhaps where those things apply. And I just want to share with you real quick what he's brought to mind so far, and just encourage you to dialogue with me and let's process it together, and just see what the Lord has to say. So he took me to Nehemiah, and most of us know kind of the highlights of Nehemiah's story with building the wall and his workers having to work and fight and things of that nature. But as I was going back through and really kind of reading through verse for verse, there was some that really stuck out and kind of fulfilled the definitions of care, cover, and communicate. And so the first one, there's several, so just bear with me. Nehemiah, first chapter. If you read through it, you see where Nehemiah comes into the knowledge that Jerusalem's walls have been destroyed, the gates have been destroyed, and so it says that he mourns and he fasts and he prays, and it says that he weeps. And so immediately, as I'm in Nehemiah 1, that told me that he cared. He cared about the people of Israel. He cared about Jerusalem. So much so that at the knowledge that it had been destroyed, it caused him to weep. And not just weep, but to then mourn and then to fast and to pray. All right, cool. So then we get to Nehemiah 2, second chapter, and we read where he's like evaluating everything that's been destroyed. He's going around looking at, all the damage, things of that nature, but he hasn't communicated anything yet to the Israelites, right? And I thought that was important because I know we're going to talk about communicating, but also the discernment to know when not to communicate or not yet is equally as important, right? Because sometimes it can do more damage when you communicate something without all the information, or you communicate something without the full understanding yourself of what you're trying to communicate, or whatever the case might be. And so before he communicated any sort of vision, any sort of plan, he first gathered as much information as he could gather. Now I know, at some point you have to, especially those who overanalyze, at some point you have to be like, okay, because you could gather information all day. So at some point you have to like stop yourself and say, okay, I think I have enough to make, an educated decision, to properly communicate a plan, a vision, etc. But this was something that he was sure to do. He was sure to try to get as much information about what had happened, what all work needed to be done before he communicated. And so when he did communicate in Nehemiah 2, he communicated the vision. He communicated the vision well, but then he also communicated the fact that the Lord's hand was on him, right? So he was clear in, this is the vision, this is the plan, but let me be clear that this is not just me coming up with something, right? But the Lord's hand is upon me, right? That reassurance that this is of the Lord. And so then we get to verse 20. And if we go, I'm actually going to go there if I can get there quickly here on my computer. If we go to Nehemiah 2 and we go to verse 20, it's actually in response to Sanballat. He said, I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. So if you go back up, actually what had happened was in what he is doing is defending Israel. He's fighting for them, right? So this was his example of cover. One of the examples of cover. He is covering them, right? He is saying, I've got their back. God's got their back, which is even more important. And he is going to ensure our success. Cool. So then we get to Nehemiah 4:4, and we see where he prays for them. He prays for the Israelites, or he prays on their behalf. Because again, Sanballat at this point is making all of these attempts to overtake them, to attack them, etc. And so again, he's covering, right? As leaders, it is most certainly our responsibility to care, yes, but then also to cover. And as my husband likened it to like an umbrella, right? And the covering could be, protection from outside things, outside attacks, spiritual attacks, like our responsibility to pray over those that we are leading, to surround them, to make sure that they know that we are there, that we have their backs. But it can also be to protect them from themselves, right? To be accountability for them, again, to surround them, to pray for them, etc. And so we see here that he did that well, that he did well in covering them. So then we get to verse 13, and this is where we start seeing the plan that Nehemiah put forth to protect his people, as well as finish the wall go into place. And what we see is that as he's setting up people to fight, he is purposely putting them near the families. And for me, that said a whole lot. My husband and I are most certainly family first people, family first leaders. And it says a lot that although he recognized the importance of the wall needing to be built, the work needing to be done, he also recognized the importance of caring for the families of those who were working, right? To make sure that those families were safe from attack, that they were not vulnerable to it, right? And so he set up people purposely near the families to keep them safe, right? So that's certainly a sign of caring, and it's also a example of covering, maybe in a more physical way, but certainly, again, showing his covering of the people to protect them. And then we see there that he clearly communicates this plan to everybody, because everybody takes their post. Like, you go here, you fill this gap, you stand over here, you go over there. Like, the plan was clearly communicated, clearly explained, as we can read in scripture, literally. And so kind of right there in one verse, he did everything. He showed care, he covered his people, and he clearly communicated. So pretty awesome. All right, so verse 19, I'm just taking you verse for verse here. Verse 19 of chapter 4, we see again examples of care and covering. In this verse, what he mentions is his realization, or his understanding, that the work is extensive and everybody is spread out, right? This was a big area that they're having to try to rebuild. And so he acknowledged, I know that you're working hard. I know that it's a lot of work. And I also know that everyone is spread out. And so he put in place the process that whenever a trumpet sounded, everyone was to join together and God would fight for them. And so again, what I see here is care, right? Acknowledgement. People want to just acknowledge that, I'm working, right? If it's your kids, you acknowledge that, I see that you're going to school. I see that you're doing your homework. I see that you're trying your best. If it's your staff, if it's your friends, there's just this acknowledgement that, I see you, right? I see you and I care. And also covering in the sense that he understood that it could be isolating. We are all spread out. We're not all together. And so I get that this can feel very isolating. And the temptation sometimes when we're in isolation and working in silos temptation can feel stronger because you don't have people there to hold you accountable. You don't have people there to kind of walk along, the journey with you per se. And so he understood that like we are working hard and you're spread out, right? And so he put a process in place to make sure that everybody could come back together, could come back together in fellowship, could come back together in prayer, could come back together and be reminded that they are together, that there's all of us, a lot of us, that we are a nation together, and that you're not just by yourself working wherever you are on the wall, and you're not in that alone, right? And so he shows covering there, most certainly. And then we get to chapter 5. And in chapter 5, verse 6, the chapter reveals that the officials, so Nehemiah's governor, right? And the officials and nobles there, he realizes have been like charging people extra. People are already hurting. They're already, lacking food, lacking finances. Like they've just come out of exile, right? So they're having to like start over. And so he goes to his own officials, his own nobles, and says, no more. And give back what you've taken from them, right? They're already hurting enough. And so you're not just going to charge them more. You're not going to do more harm to them. Give back what you've taken, and moving forward, don't do it again, right? And so he covers them. He covers them as their leader to go to his own people and say, this is not going to take place on my watch, right? And then lastly, verse 14, it talks about how previous governors would get certain foods or certain monies, because they were governor, but the things that they were receiving were being given to them, being taken from the people and given to them, right? And so he refused it. He was like, as long as I'm governor, I'm not going to take from my people more just so I can have it when they're already hurting, right? Even though he might have been entitled to it, he said, no, I'm not going to take that. Like, I will make that sacrifice because, again, these are the people that I care for. These are the people that I cover. And these are the people that I want to communicate to, but I also want to communicate that message to, that I care for them and that I take very seriously my responsibility to cover them, right? And so he refused that was due to him because he didn't want to create hardship for them. So that's just the first 5 chapters of Nehemiah. Again, I know it sounds like rough information, right? A little disorganized, whatever. And again, as I said, it's because it was literally just given to me in the last like 24 hours or less. And so I am still processing it. I am still, asking the Lord to give me revelation about it and to help me put it together in a way that's a little more smooth and teachable, etc. But I wanted to share it with you now, in hopes that some part of it would resonate with you, and that if nothing else, those 3 words would ring true in your heart: to care, to cover, and to communicate. So again, I want to hear from you. Message us through any of our social media platforms. The Forever Fused is the handle. You can find us on any of the social media platforms. The Forever Fused. I want to hear from you. Tell me something. Tell me something good. Anyway, it is super good to just again be with you and to share this information with you. Care well, cover well, communicate well, right? And I believe the Lord will honor and bless that. So until next time, this is About That. And that's a wrap.